Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. It was a typical Saturday morning when Emily broached the subject. The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm patterns on the table where we sat, sipping our coffee. The calm of the morning, however, was about to be shattered. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice unusually measured. She set down her coffee mug with a deliberate slowness, a sign that what she was about to say was not to be taken lightly. I looked up from my newspaper, sensing that something significant was coming. "About what?" She took a deep breath, as though steeling herself for the words she was about to utter. "I've decided to take a short trip next weekend. Just for one night." I frowned, setting the newspaper aside. "A trip? You didn't mention anything about this before." Emily looked down at her hands, which were now clasped tightly together. "It's not just any trip. It's something I need for myself. I've been feeling like I'm losing a part of who I am, and this is a way for me to reconnect with myself." Her words seemed to float in the air between us, their weight growing heavier with each passing second. "Reconnect with yourself? What do you mean?" I asked, trying to grasp the situation. Emily lifted her gaze to meet mine, her expression both resolute and pained. "I need to explore outside our marriage. It's about personal growth, about understanding who I am beyond the confines of our relationship. I believe it's something everyone should be able to do." "Explore outside our marriage?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. "You're talking about infidelity, Emily. How is that about personal growth?" Her face flushed with frustration, but she remained calm. "It's not about being unfaithful. It's about freedom. I've read about how modern relationships are evolving. People are learning to embrace their own journeys, even if it means stepping outside their comfort zones." I stared at her, my mind racing. "So, this is some sort of personal experiment for you? What about us? What about our vows?" Emily sighed deeply. "I understand that this might be difficult for you, but this isn't just about breaking rules. It's about finding a part of me that I feel has been suppressed. I'm entitled to this experience, and it doesn't diminish what we have." I could feel a tightness in my chest as her words settled. "And what if I don't agree with this? What if I'm not comfortable with you doing this?" Her eyes softened, but there was a hint of defensiveness in her voice. "I hope you can understand that this is something I need. It's not about disregarding you or our marriage. It's about finding balance and growth. We've been together for so long, and I think we both need to reassess what we want." My mind felt like it was spinning. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but I found myself at a loss for words. I simply nodded, the realization sinking in that this was not just a passing whim but a serious decision she had made. "I need you to think about it," Emily said, her voice softening as she reached across the table. "I want us to have an open conversation about this. But it's something I'm going to do, with or without your blessing." Her hand rested on mine, but I felt no comfort in the gesture. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice flat. As she stood up and moved to clear the dishes, I sat there, staring at the remnants of our breakfast, feeling a profound sense of loss. The morning sun now felt cold, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in my heart. The days following Emily's announcement felt like an emotional battleground. I walked through each day with a numbness that masked the anger and confusion swirling beneath the surface. Emily, determined to discuss her plans further, approached me with increasing frequency, but I responded with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Emily entered the kitchen, her face lined with anxiety. "Can we talk?" she asked, leaning against the counter. I glanced at her briefly before returning my focus to the stove. "About what?" She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "I've been thinking about how we can handle this. Maybe if I check in with you regularly, or if we set some boundaries, it might make things easier." I turned to face her, my expression neutral. "I'd rather not." Emily's face fell, her eyes widening in a mixture of surprise and frustration. "You'd rather not?" But this is important to me. Shouldn't we at least discuss how to make this work? I'd rather not, I repeated, my tone firm but devoid of emotion. I could see the frustration building in her eyes, but I didn't offer any additional explanation. Emily's shoulders slumped, and she let out a sigh. I'm trying to be open about this, and all you're doing is shutting me down. Don't you care at all about what I'm going through? I care, I said quietly, but I'd rather not discuss it further. Her desperation became more evident with each attempt. Isn't there any way we can compromise? Maybe if I agree to certain terms, it'll make it easier for both of us. I'd rather not, I said again, my response becoming almost mechanical. Each time she broached the subject, I offered the same reply, and it was clear that my refusal to engage was taking its toll on her. One night, as we sat in the living room, Emily tried again. Her voice was softer, more pleading. Please, can we at least talk about how we're going to handle this while I'm away? I want to make sure we're on the same page. I looked at her, seeing the raw emotion in her eyes. I'd rather not, I said, my voice steady but distant. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. I'm feeling so lost right now. I thought we could work through this together, but it feels like you're just pushing me away. Maybe that's what I need to do, I said, feeling a pang of guilt but not relenting. I need some space. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Emily's attempts to bridge the gap were met with my continued avoidance, and her sense of urgency was palpable. She began to show signs of emotional vulnerability, cracks in her previously confident exterior that she tried hard to mask. One morning, as I was leaving for work, Emily stopped me at the door. Can't we at least talk about this one last time? I don't know what to do if you keep shutting me out. I looked at her, my heart heavy but my resolve intact. I'd rather not, I said once more, stepping out into the cool morning air. As I drove to work, I reflected on the strange sense of control I felt by maintaining my distance. It was a decision I had made, and while it felt right in the moment, it was clear that my refusal to engage was pushing Emily further into a state of desperation and confusion. Emily's return was marked by an unmistakable heaviness. It was a gray, rainy afternoon when she walked back through the front door, her demeanor a stark contrast to the confident and self-assured woman who had left. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked as if the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. I was in the living room, reading a book, when I heard the key turn in the lock. I glanced up as she entered, and the sight of her brought a twinge of concern. Hey, she said softly, her voice lacking its usual assertiveness. Hey, I replied, setting the book aside. You're back early. Emily nodded, dropping her bag near the door. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I gestured to the sofa. Go ahead. She sat down, her posture slumped. I've been thinking a lot, she began, her eyes scanning the room rather than meeting mine. I thought I needed that time to figure things out, but it didn't turn out the way I expected. I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. What do you mean? Emily took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I was so focused on my own needs and desires that I didn't stop to consider how my actions were affecting you. I've realized now that I was selfish. The trip, it didn't bring me clarity. It only made me see how much I've hurt you. Her admission struck me, and I could see genuine regret in her eyes. You hurt me, I echoed, my voice reflecting the hurt I felt. Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. I see now how much I took for granted. I thought I was seeking personal growth, but all I've done is create more distance between us. I miss what we had. I want to fix this. I remained silent, letting her words sink in. The room was filled with the sound of rain tapping against the window, an unwelcome accompaniment to her heartfelt plea. I've made a mess of things, Emily continued, her voice trembling. I've been trying to convince myself that this was about finding myself, but it was really about avoiding the real issues in our marriage. I want to come back, to make things right. Can we try to work through this? I studied her, seeing the raw vulnerability she had been hiding. Why do you think things would be different now? I asked, trying to understand her change of heart. Emily's gaze fell to her lap, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Because I've finally faced the truth. I've realized that what I was searching for was already here, in our relationship. I was just too blind to see it. I don't want to lose what we have. I want to rebuild and be the partner you deserve. I could see the depth of her regret and the sincerity in her plea, but I felt a deep-seated hesitation. I need time to think about this, I said finally, my voice calm but distant. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight. Emily nodded, wiping her tears. I understand. I'll give you the time you need. Just know that I'm here and willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. As she stood up to leave, I watched her, feeling a mix of emotions. Her realization was a step towards reconciliation, but the path to mending our relationship felt long and uncertain. The rain continued to fall outside, a fitting backdrop to the fragile state of our marriage. The days following Emily's return were a period of reflection and strained interactions. Despite her heartfelt apology and genuine regret, I found myself struggling with the idea of reconciliation. I was deeply wounded, and the emotional distance I maintained seemed to be a protective shield against further pain. One evening, Emily and I sat across from each other at the dinner table. The meal was almost untouched, the food growing cold between us. Emily's attempts to engage in conversation were met with my minimal responses. Can we talk about what happens next? Emily asked, her voice filled with apprehension. I really want to work through this, but I need to know where we stand. I looked at her, the weight of her plea clear in her eyes. I don't know if there's much to discuss right now, I said calmly. I'm still processing everything. Emily's frustration was evident. I understand that you're hurt, but shutting me out isn't going to help. We need to communicate, to make a plan for how to move forward. I'd rather not, I replied, my tone unwavering. I think I need more time to figure things out on my own. Emily's face fell, her voice wavering. You're pushing me away again. I'm trying to make amends, and it feels like you're not even giving us a chance. I remained silent, feeling a pang of guilt but remaining resolute. I'm not ready to talk about it, I said finally. I need space. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional distance between us only grew. Emily's attempts to reach out, to initiate conversations about our future, were met with my continued avoidance. I spent my time outside the home, focusing on work and seeking solace in quiet, solitary activities. One evening, Emily came to me with a different approach. She handed me a letter, her hands trembling slightly. I wrote this for you, she said softly. I just want you to know how much I regret my actions and how deeply I want to repair our relationship. I took the letter but didn't open it immediately. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but my feelings were a tangled mess. Thank you, I said quietly, slipping the letter into my pocket. I'll read it later. Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I hope you can find it in yourself to forgive me. The letter remained unread on my nightstand for days. I found myself caught between a desire for closure and a need to maintain my emotional distance. My own actions during her absence, including spending time with another woman, were my secret. I chose not to disclose them, feeling that doing so might further complicate an already painful situation. One afternoon, as Emily was out running errands, I sat alone in our living room, staring at the letter. I thought about the future and what it might look like if we tried to rebuild. But the wounds from her departure and the emotional betrayal still felt fresh. When Emily returned home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked hopeful as she entered, but the hope in her eyes dimmed as she saw my expression. I've been thinking, I said, my voice steady. I appreciate your apology and your willingness to work things out. But I'm not sure if I'm ready to reconcile just yet. Emily's shoulders slumped, and she sat down heavily on the couch. What does that mean for us? She asked quietly. It means, I said, choosing my words carefully, that we need to take some time apart. I need to figure out what I want and how to move forward. Emily's eyes filled with tears once more. I understand, she said, her voice breaking. I just wish things were different. I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. So do I. As she packed a few things and prepared to leave, the silence between us was thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Emily's departure marked a new chapter of separation, one where we both faced the uncertainty of our future. I continued to maintain my distance, feeling that the space was necessary for me to come to terms with everything that had happened. The relationship remained unresolved, a fragile connection held together by the thin thread of what once was.